Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is James Maskell and I am extremely excited to have a doctor, a digital health expert, and someone after my own heart, Dr. Robin Berzin. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So great to have you here, Doctor. Dr. Berzin and I have been friends for quite a while, since you used to have your maiden name, Dr. Robin Friedlander. You may have seen her writing all across the web, but I'm really excited to have Dr. Berzin in the house tonight because she is passionate about two of the things that not only is this whole summit built around, but two things that I believe are the future of medicine, and I know that she does as well. We're talking about digital health, and we're talking about functional medicine. So it's so glad to have you here, Robin, and to share your expertise with the world.
So happy to be here.
I mean, it's only obvious, right, that young doctors are going to be passionate about digital health. This is not something that, the traditional old guard doctors are excited about yet, is it?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, I was raised on digital. I never wrote a progress note that wasn't on a computer. And so many of the people that taught me medicine, taught me everything I know, are really just, they don't have that same comfort level with even working with a computer day to day. So I think a lot of the resistance in medicine to not just moving to electronic medical records, which is a no-brainer, but really harnessing the power of what technology can do for us in medicine is just that familiarity issue. And that's something that we have to make it easy for them and entice them to overcome, because I think it's absolutely essential that we get there and we start making these digital tools work for us for a healthier population.
Awesome. So Dr. Berzin went to school at Columbia Medical School and also has started a couple of apps and tools. Curator, I know that you were a co-founder of, and that's pretty exciting. You want to tell the people at home what that does?
Sure. So back when I was a fourth-year medical student, I looked around and realized that communication between doctors was just in the dark ages. I mean, literally in the hospital, you're talking landlines, fax machines, and pagers. And you're sitting there paging a consult, waiting for them to call you back, waiting for the landline phone to ring. And this is in, just a couple years ago. This wasn't 10 or 15 years ago. This was just a few years ago. So a friend and I realized this, and we started thinking about communication amongst healthcare providers in general and thinking about, gosh, it's really so siloed. Columbia doesn't talk to Cornell and they're in the same city, and Columbia doesn't really talk to Harvard and they're not that far away, and they're oftentimes just reinventing the wheel. So how can we help communication? So long story short, we saw that everybody was text messaging in the hospital, and when your doctor technically text messages about you to another doctor, that's not HIPAA compliant because the communication isn't technically secure, and everybody's getting yelled at for text messaging, but text messaging is just the way that people communicate today, right?
Yeah.
So we were frustrated, so we thought that we could build an app that would let people basically text message in groups and talk to each other in a way that was comfortable, in a way that was modern, but in a way that was also secure and protected health information the way that you need to work in medicine. So essentially, it was like GroupMe or WhatsApp for docs.
That's
and
cool.
We built it, and now it's being used in institutions across the U.S., which is super cool.
That's so exciting. And that sort of took you on to doing Health 2.0 and some of that other work. Do you want what's the focus of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So way back before med school started, I was a producer for Dr. Oz's radio show. This is before he had a TV show, and I had some background in media and production a little bit then. And then my interest in digital technology and how it's transforming healthcare led me out to the Health 2.0 conference, which is this huge meeting every year. It's the biggest meeting for all the leaders in healthcare from every side of healthcare and tech who are thinking about how digital tech is changing things in medicine. And I connected really well with the founder of that company, Indu, and she and I teamed up to think about, over the past year and a half, how do we not just create all these cool technologies for people who are in the industry and kind of already get it and think about it all day, right? But how do we take it out to the public and engage the public with these technologies? So we created something called Health Interactive, which is this awesome new event series all for the public, all about cool new technologies for living your healthiest life.
That's great. So you've obviously got a lot of understanding and sort of acumen in this area as a doctor and as a clinician, but also in the digital world. So you said earlier that there was this potential that you saw for digital to change healthcare for all the patients and even some of the doctors that are listening right now. What would you say is the potential? If you take a step back and say, look, we're at sort of age zero here of the digital revolution in health, I'm absolutely convinced that it's going to disrupt medicine significantly. But what would you say would be, let's start with patients, what would you say would be the benefit that you can see for this digital disruption for patients?
Okay. I think there's kind of two big buckets that I see as being most exciting, at least to me, about how digital is transforming healthcare. And the first bucket is on the prevention side. So right now, medicine is kind of an end game. We wait till you're really sick and your symptoms are out of control, and then we try to deal with them and manage them with medications and drugs and procedures, and we're getting to you way too late. And so on the patient side, one of the things that I think is really cool are all of the wearable technologies and sensors and tracking apps and things that are going to let you not just think, hey, maybe I don't feel so well, but I'm going to wait till I'm really, really sick to talk to a doctor. Yep. We're going to get to you way before that. And we're going to begin to understand how things like stress, your diet, your environment are impacting your health on a day-to-day basis. We're going to get to you way before you're sick, and we're going to prevent you from getting sick. And right now, prevention's kind of this, I don't know, like loosey-goosey thing that nobody really can wrap their head around, because everyone says, well, I want to eat this hamburger now. I really don't care what happens to me in 20 years from now, because humans can't really grasp like 20 years from now in a tangible sense. And I think these technologies in a large way are going to make the tangibility of what your health means to you today present in real time. And that's going to change the way that people perceive themselves, their bodies, and it's also going to give medicine all these new touch points to interact with you way before you're really, really sick, which I think is hugely important.
Hugely. That's enough by itself, but what's the other one?
So the other bucket is that, medicine right now is super inefficient. That whole, pager landline thing, that extends across medicine. So much of doctors' energy, healthcare's energy goes into all of this nitty-gritty management stuff, and patient comes in, they have no idea what medications they're on, they don't have them written down anywhere, I have nowhere to understand if they came from a doctor in North Carolina and now they're coming to me. I have to sit there and type in all their medicines to my system. As digital technology becomes the default, it's going to be the way that we communicate, and all of these systems are going to talk to each other, and we're going to stop spending all this time and energy on stupid administrative stuff that takes away from actual thinking and actual care, and it's going to give regular people, patients, ownership of their own health information, because they're actually going to have a way to store it and carry it around and work with it that's not completely like 100 scraps of paper that you forget and throw away. And it's also going to save doctors and the healthcare system all this time, because we are spending so much energy on all this administrative stuff that just needs to be taken care of by computers so that we can actually do the real work. And when that happens, I think the scientific research base is going to accelerate. We're just going to enter this whole new era where we don't have to worry about tracking information to such a degree that wastes our time. We're going to worry about the real nitty-gritty of medicine that matters to people.
So the benefits for patients of that side of it is that, less iatrogenic deaths, I would think.
Oh my gosh, safety, efficiency, usability, enjoyment of how you come into your doctor's office. The time spent with your doctor is going to be much more fruitful.
Could you see the pricing of medicine come down? I mean, we've never seen the pricing of medicine come down, but it seems like if you fire all those administrative people and you have, effective systems, we could actually reduce the cost of delivering medicine on a private basis.
I mean, I think absolutely. I mean, right now you have something like double the amount of staff for every doctor just to deal, especially in smaller practices that aren't part of a big hospital system. Little practices are basically just like an insurance claims processing unit. And most doctors who are running these practices, they didn't go to med school or learn how to do that.
Yeah.
But suddenly that's taking a lot of their energy, and if they don't oversee that, they literally go out of business. They don't get reimbursed very much with insurance as it is. And then they need all these support staff to help them with that. And that stuff should really be automated, easy, straightforward. It should not be what doctors are spending their time worrying about.
That sounds like a massive change and something
Yes.
that so as this change occurs, it seems to me, from when I was at South by Southwest earlier this year, I saw a lot of sort of healthy 30-year-olds building apps for other healthy 30-year-olds, because getting the patients to engage into the process is definitely going to be easier than doctors and other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see that this will sort of proliferate out over time? Do you see it'll start with a certain group and then it'll move out? And what's your sort of ideas of that timing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, there's more going on, I think, behind the scenes that I've seen that's really exciting than just what we see at South by Southwest. On a federal level, the Blue Button Initiative is actually a federal initiative that says we all have to own our own health data, and they're getting all of industry, from insurance companies to pharmaceutical companies to labs, to make sure not only is it easy for people to own their data, but that they actually give it to them and make that happen. And that's happening on a federal level. The Veterans Administration is working on, they went open note and electronic medical record before anyone. And veterans are a huge population. So that stuff is actually happening there. There's a lot of interesting work looking at minority groups and the underserved, and making sure that we're building tools for them. And some of the big foundations like Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, California Healthcare Foundation are really focused on that. And I think what really needs to happen is that it has to go beyond just tools for doctors and patients, but tools for the people between doctors and patients that are really going to make our country healthier. So that's community health workers, nutritionists, social workers, that layer of people that are out in the community talking to people. They need to be just as empowered with technology as patients and doctors, because ultimately health has to be happening in your community, in your home, in your school, in your workplace. It can't just be happening, when you go to the doctor's office and you have all these nifty tools.
That's the shift in paradigm that we're talking about, because most people think about medicine now as this end game that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. When it's got so wrong that you're in the doctor's office, right. Taking health much more primary to people. It's something that people are doing every day. Mm-hmm. That's quite a shift for everyone. How do you think people are going to deal with this shift?
Hopefully there's enough incentives in the system at present, and there'll be more that starts to happen, and it just kind of becomes embedded. I mean, I think that, health is life, and a life well lived health is a byproduct of a life well lived. So if we can give people opportunities to live a great life out in the world, then they're going to have health as an end product of that. So, I mean, there's also things happening in big employers. I mean, we think of, this whole system where the employer has your health insurance is kind of messed up. It doesn't work that well. But the reality is there's also really good opportunities, and a lot of employers are seizing that. They're bringing in-house health clinics, they're bringing in all these resources, because a huge employer that has 100-something thousand employees can reach a lot of people quickly. There's also new thinking in the way that we build apartment buildings and housing to make it healthier, thinking about the built environment, thinking about embedding technology into architecture. I think that there are some cool things happening, and I really want to see health decentralized physically, so it's not just related to the hospital and a doctor's office, that these physical locations where you can access health clinics, health coaches, they're everywhere, they're out in the world, but it's centralized administratively, so that technology all talks to each other and all of the information can flow back and forth, but that instead of having it centralized physically in a hospital, it's centralized, it's decentralized, and then all the information can spread.
So you need like an API that everyone can access that information with, basically, so that tools can be built everywhere.
And more APIs. I mean, more and more are available and out there, and that's why the federal initiatives, I think, are important, because they're encouraging some of these big organizations and hospitals and electronic medical records, these big, like, heavy-handed kind of massive systems. An API lets anybody come in and build something on that system, and it lets systems talk to each other. So that's why that's so important. It's basically like throwing down the gauntlet and letting people in.
That's so great. So if I'm a patient and this is 2014, it's September, what are the coolest... let's start with, before we get into the actual technologies themselves, what is available for me to track right now, and what should I be tracking? Like, what's the priority?
Okay. That's a great question. I mean, you can kind of track, I think, anything under the sun right now, in terms of, there's lots of personal health record apps out there, so check them out. Microsoft Health Vault is probably the most used or the one that's most out there, but there's a ton of other ones that give you one place to put all your health information. And I think, to me, more than tracking your steps and more than tracking everything that you eat, which can be super helpful too, but I think just knowing what's going on with you, knowing what medicines you take and how to call your doctor and what your insurance is, and having all of that in one place as a reference, to me, that's super important to track. And then the other cool thing I think that's happening is, you can wear all of these different cool activity bracelets, and there's the Fitbit and the Fuel Band and the Up, and there's a million of them, but they let you see a little bit of insight into what you're doing every day. So you can track your steps, you can, to some degree, track your sleep. Some of the devices let you track your calories burned if they track your heat, and they actually sort of touch your skin. A new one coming out, the Arrow says it's going to track the calories that you're intaking every day, which should be really interesting. And I think that people say, oh, well, they're not always that accurate, or, I try one and I'm not sure, I get bored of it in a couple of weeks. But I think the coolest thing about them is that most people I know try them for a little bit, and it's not that you have to wear it for the rest of your life, but it gives you a really big insight into what you're actually doing. People say, oh, I probably walk 10,000 steps a day, and then they wear one of these things and it's like 2,000, and they're realizing how much they actually sit. So for me, that awareness is probably the biggest thing that they offer right now, but that's not a small thing.
Yeah, awareness is a great starting point, and obviously it'll build on top of that, and things will get more accurate and things will start talking to each other better. So what are things that will be able to be tracked in the future that you're most excited about that you've seen out there?
I don't know if we're there yet, but I really think that the cool thing, if you can start to track calories and by something that's just on your wrist or on your body, I think that we're going to be able to start tracking stress. And to me, stress is such an underlying driver of so many of the problems we see in health. And if you can have something that, stress can be, again, this kind of woo-woo amorphous thing, like, oh, maybe I'm stressed out, but it's not that big a deal. But it is a big deal, and it's having a huge impact on your health, from your hormones to your fertility to your blood pressure to early dementia. So if we can show some of these things and actually show that they're real using some of these trackers, that is going to blow everything out of the water to me, because we're going to say this stuff matters. The fact that you're in an environment that causes you extreme amounts of stress is affecting your health. It is causing chronic disease. And as a society, we're going to have to deal with that. So it's not going to be this thing that you can't put your finger on anymore. And I'm most excited about that.
Yeah, that is exciting, because people use that term very loosely, and you're right, it does have a sort of a woo-woo connotation in certain circles, like de-stressing and so forth. But if we look at not only office visits, but all of these chronic diseases seem to have a massive stress component. So getting this chronic stress under control is a massive priority. The first thing I think we have to do is understand that it's happening, right?
Right, absolutely.
So once we can start to measure this, do you also see that there'll be apps to sort of measure the things that we do to try and reduce it? So if we go for acupuncture, or if we do a breathing technique or otherwise, we'll actually be able to get data on how those things are working?
Oh, absolutely. And that's another thing. It's going to give us, again, I'm a functional medicine doctor, and I think that stress is hugely important. I see it in my practice, and I use things like yoga and meditation and acupuncture as regular tools in my practice. And a lot of times these things, there is some good data behind them, but one of the things that's so hard in medicine is that to sort of show that anything is valid, you have to do this massive randomized controlled trial, and it's very expensive, and the only people who can pay for that are big pharma companies. So therefore, you only get proof around the things like drugs that the pharmaceutical companies can pay to show proof for. So it's going to essentially unleash the power in all of us to be able to be researchers out in our own life. And we're going to start bringing this data together. We're going to see how stress is really impacting different disease states and also different treatments. And I think it's going to validate a lot of stuff. It's going to invalidate some other stuff, and that's good, because maybe we're doing things across the medical community that are not worthwhile, and we need to know that.
That is the most exciting thing. You keep on saying new things, and I keep on thinking that that's the most exciting. But that, to me, is really, really exciting. So, this is a funny question, but what do you think, after we get this information, what do you think we'll look back on of the medicine that we'll do now and say, that was really like caveman medicine?
Oh, gosh. Such a good question. I think we're going to have a big upheaval in the psych world, certainly, in terms of a lot of the psychotropic drugs we use for depression and anxiety.
Yes.
Because we're going to want to get to the root cause of those as opposed to modulating them chemically. And certainly those chemical modulators can be really important for some people, and I don't knock that. I think it's incredible and helpful at times, but I think it's going to give us a completely different perspective on healing, and I think it's going to give us more of a sense of, I remember being an intern in a hospital, and people would come in, heart disease, heart failure exacerbations, third heart attack, already had a heart transplant from heart failure, and all of this stuff being lifestyle driven. And we as doctors in that setting were so focused on, well, what can we do? We got to save your life and keep your blood pressure up and not let you die and send you back out into the world. And then the same person would show up again, a couple weeks later and have the same problem all over again. And as doctors, we were frustrated and we felt like we were failing. But the reason was because we were just operating in this hospital that didn't reach everyone out in their lives. And what's going to happen is this technology is going to bridge that gap. There's like a huge communication wall. It's like a wall in Game of Thrones, and we can't talk across it. And we're going to have to get through that and start talking so that some of these things aren't just happening on a repetitive basis, because they're happening for reasons that have nothing to do with what goes on at the end of the point when you have to do something to save somebody's life.
That's so exciting. This movement to cause, I think, is so exciting, from symptoms to cause, being able to get other data rather than just how you feel and the symptoms that are coming up. I'm very excited about that. You mentioned something a little bit earlier, which was, we can be our own scientific experiment, and we can practice things on ourselves and we can see the results. This is sort of an extension of the first buds that we're seeing of what we call the citizen science movement, where essentially, if you think things like 23andMe and uBiome, basically getting everyone to participate in science rather than, very small groups of elite researchers that are funded by pharma. And, even at this stage, it's just getting started. So with, say, uBiome, which is one of the ways that you can actually go out and look at your microbiome and sort of sequence your germs, you're still sending them off in a little packet across the country and doing that. But what I'm excited by is imagining all this data is on your smartphone, just the instant feedback of all kinds of interventions over huge populations, all being synthesized really quickly. That to me is very, very exciting.
And think about the geoinformatics layer on that. So geoinformatics is using data and information around physical geography and space. So why does everybody in this one town have a really high rate of colon cancer? And why does so many people in these certain populations or these certain workplaces have thyroid disease? We're going to start to be able to track that, and it's not going to be so amorphous, and it's going to be happening in real time. It's not going to take, a big study just came out a couple weeks ago about mammograms, and it's basically the zillionth study looking at like 90,000 people over 20 years that shows that, mammograms basically confer no mortality benefit. And they showed that 10 years ago. They're showing it again now. They've shown it a million ways to Sunday. The medical community hasn't, responded yet, and there's a lot of emotional, I think, reasons for that. And also the doctors, organizations, some of them, don't agree. And, research is just taking those so long. And you do these massive studies to look over time. And then it takes even longer to get people to sort of change their ways. And I think when you have all this technology operating out in life, out in the field, we're going to get all of this research is just going to accelerate, and we're going to know so much more. We're going to be able to make changes so much more quickly because we're going to have that data faster.
That is the most exciting thing.
It's also exciting.
Yeah, it is very exciting. Look, I have to say, I've been in the field of integrative medicine for 8 years. And for the last 8 years, up until I went to South by Southwest, I was absolutely convinced that it was functional medicine and integrative medicine that was going to disrupt medicine. This was going to be seen to be that much more effective, and then insurance companies would get it and they'd start using it and it would disrupt everything. But now I'm completely convinced that it's the digital that's going to disrupt everything, and then the functional medicine will just pop in because it makes so much more sense. Like, functional medicine doctors and integrative doctors are trained at looking at cause, not in symptoms, and not dealing with, algorithms of symptoms, but are trained at looking at cause. And once we have a lot more data for cause, I think the stock of those doctors goes up dramatically, and I think it's just going to be a natural progression from. But it's the digital disruption that's really going to change medicine first, and then the functional medicine doctor will sort of become king at that point. I'm sure you think the same. I'm
I
preaching
do.
to the choir in a certain way,
Yes.
but
Yeah, totally. In medicine, everything is about the data. It's kind of like in other fields, it's show me the money. In medicine, it's show me the data.
yeah.
And, all of this digital technology is just going to give us reams and reams and reams of data to show. I think that functional medicine was right all along. I think that a couple of shifts are happening in parallel. I think the digital and the technology is the enabler, right? It's not the answer, but it's the thing that's going to allow everything to happen. And when you think about moving from a fee-for-service model more to an outcomes model, and also a model where people own their own data and are empowered and are expected to be responsible players in their own health, which integrative medicine has expected all along, and now that shift will hopefully over time happen in conventional medicine. But when you look at those two things together, I think all of them are going to bolster the value and make really crystal clear the value of functional medicine to everybody else. And so, when you think of integrative medicine and you think of meditation and, you think of these ancient traditions and ancient wisdom that are informing the values and the philosophy behind a lot of what we do, it's in present time, digital technology is just going to illuminate all of that and make accessible all of that for us as practitioners, for patients, and also for the medical community at large,
Yeah.
I think.
So what happens when you're in rooms of techies and you start talking about functional medicine? Because they don't know anything about this.
No, they don't. Not necessarily. I mean, some people do. Functional medicine, I'm finding more and more is still a word that is not, familiar to a lot of people, and I'm excited for it to become more and more familiar. I always think of it as, functional medicine, and then there's just functional medicine, like medicine that functions, because so much of medicine as it's practiced, as I was trained in it, is really dysfunctional, especially in the primary care and outpatient care world. So no, I don't know that the tech is as familiar as it should be with functional medicine, but I think if you sat down a bunch of functional medicine docs and a bunch of techies in a room, they would all get along really well and it'd be a really excellent cocktail party, because they're all people that are kind of cutting through the BS and are looking for solutions. And tech people, they identify a problem, they build a solution, they test it, they iterate. And in functional medicine, we do a lot of the same. We're looking for real solutions. We're not just looking to follow a protocol because it's paid for by an insurance company and has been, or because it's the way that things have been done all along. We're looking to do things the right way and use all the tools available to us to do it. And I think we share that somewhat iconoclastic, but also very practical spirit, and so I'm looking forward to those two communities kind of coming together.
I would say it's sort of a futurist outlook, because from a tech point of view, it's very futurist. But even I think one of the things that draw people to functional medicine is realizing that the types of diseases that we're facing right now are not the diseases that our whole medical system was built around. Single cause, single germ, single everything. These are multifactorial diseases. And so, a futurist would look at it and say, hey, we're facing different things. We really need to evolve. And that's why this thing is called the evolution of medicine, because we are facing different issues and we have these new amazing tools at our disposal. Now it's just a case of getting people on the right seats on the bus.
Right. Totally. And, we, as in functional medicine, we look at the body and we don't divide it up into organ system and think, oh, well, this organ system versus this organ system, everything talks to each other. And in tech, that's the same principle. You look at the entire system. You see how everything interrelates. You don't just look at one piece of it, because if you do, you build something that will fail, and you don't, in tech, want to build something that will fail. So I think, again, there's that same taking a step back, looking at what's really going on and having a bit of a different perspective. It's just a different philosophy and a different approach. I think conventional medicine and functional medicine will eventually be one medicine, because they're doing a lot of the same stuff. They're just taking a different philosophical approach in a lot of cases to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of that stuff that we've spoken about, I know one of the core things of functional medicine is really looking at digestive function. How do you see technology getting right down in there?
There's already these pills, these capsules you can swallow, and they go and take pictures all the way down your intestines and see, if there's abrasions and cancer and other things. So I just think that, tech is getting smaller and smaller. It's getting cheaper and cheaper, and it's getting more and more disposable. So I think that's going to when you think about the medical device industry, I think that rule's true as well. So we're going to eventually be able to swallow something. It's going to take a bunch of samples, send things out, do a bunch of tests while it's in there, talk to your bacteria, give them some love,
That's great.
take some photos, come out, and then you're going to be able to get a lot more data. And the same thing is happening already actually in sleep medicine. Right now, to get diagnosed with sleep apnea, you have to go somewhere, you have to spend the night, you have to wear all these machines, and you have to get, it's this massive production and do a sleep study to prove that you have this problem. And sooner we're having some of these devices that you can just, like a Band-Aid, throw on, wear at home overnight. It's going to talk to your computer wirelessly. It's going to say, yes, this person has obstructive sleep apnea, and it's going to be very cheap, and it's going to change that whole industry. And that's just one very, specific example.
Awesome. Yeah, that's cool. So, what I see people talking about now is this, okay, the patient is going to be sort of fairly easy to get on board. They can do it through their smartphone. Doctors, definitely not so much, but, these bigger systems, it seems to me that one of the things that I see is sort of a possible... Well, before we get to that, let me ask you about peer-to-peer sharing, because one of the things that I've been really interested in is some of the results, like who is actually reversing chronic disease, who is actually helping people lose hundreds of pounds. There's typically some sort of community involvement, right? Mm-hmm. So you see Mark Hyman with the Saddleback Church, or you see, like my mother-in-law, she lost 100 pounds, and basically all she had to do was have an accountability buddy that she had to call and tell who she was eating. So I think this peer-to-peer communication is pretty interesting as well. It seems like that might be an area where there could be some innovation, because having someone who you're accountable to or someone that cares about you sort of goes to what you were saying a minute ago about these extra people outside of doctors and hospitals that are involved in your health.
Yeah. I mean, right now I think of health as this weird area, and why it's been so problematic is that health is hidden, right? Health is secret. Health is this thing that nobody wants to share or talk about. It's not sexy. People worry that people are going to find out their health information and discriminate against them at work, or discriminate against them sort of socially. So health has been this hidden thing. And I think what's going to happen as people own their data and as health becomes and wellness becomes a bigger and bigger deal is that people are going to start talking about health, sharing health. And when you have these, great personal health records where all your data is in one place, and that can talk to your social network and tap into your different layers of your community, health is going to kind of open up and be this thing that we share and we talk about, and that's exciting. It isn't going to be this thing that's in the closet. And for me, I think that on the communication level, tech is going to just allow that to happen for people in whatever community they're in, whether it's their church, whether it's their neighborhood, whether it's their place of work.
Well, that's really interesting, because not only are we both bloggers and we've seen that way of communicating information out, we both blog for Mind Body Green, has a ton of traffic and a ton of people see the information, so you can say something once and it gets seen a million times. So that's really exciting. But then also, right now, we're speaking on this summit, and anyone can listen into this, and then they can share it with their friends and family, for here. So, one of the big shifts that I see as well is also this information dissemination, which is a radical shift, because if you look back how medicine has evolved up until now, you have a situation where, I don't know, the shaman who knew a little bit and they passed it down to their, the tribe leaders. And then you had sort of like institutionalized medicine here where, understanding is going to doctors, and doctors know everything and patients know nothing. And there's this sort of arbitrage of information that doctors do to patients. Whereas now, part of this summit and the concept is really that the information's out there. There's not going to be a lack of information. Mm-hmm. And now information is available to everyone. How do you see that this kind of information will be proliferating, like information on health, not so much your own personal data, but like what you should be doing and best practices and those kind of things?
Yeah. I think that, more and more frequently, it's just going to be so much easier for people to communicate right now. You have to go to somebody's office and meet with your doctor. You're just going to be able to use all of these different digital mechanisms to communicate with all of the people in your life that impact your health, whether it's your doctor, your nutritionist, your psychiatrist, whoever that is. And I also think that as people own their health data, demand is going to change medicine. Medicine, I don't think, is really going to change from within. I think it's going to be pressure of millions of people from the outside. You look at just in general a place like the United States and the technology community in the United States where you give people tools and then they create something better than you could ever imagine. And I think when we give people ownership of this data, the population at large is going to start saying, hey, I want that. And they're going to say, I want to share what I'm doing with these kinds of people, or I want to create these kinds of competition. And information to date has been so siloed and so sheltered and so controlled in one direction. But when all those directions open up, I think you're going to see major shifts in healthcare that are going to come from the population saying, we want this, or creating new things. And medicine's going to have to respond.
Yeah.
Which is going to be cool.
It's going to be a fun time to be alive and a fun time to be in the industry to see what happens, because I think we probably have an idea in our heads right now of what disruption in medicine means, and it's probably like a few people wearing a few wearables, but it's really going to be a complete shift, isn't it? And it's not even, we probably can't even think of exactly the level that we're going to get to.
I mean, you're going to be doing all of your lab testing at home and getting the results instantaneously. I think wearables are just going to be ubiquitous and embedded in everything, and they're just going to be the default. They're not going to be this big deal and big funky thing. I mean, I think we're going to look back and look at this time and all the bracelets and things that are clunky things that people are wearing, the way that we look at like Star Trek from the 70s.
Yeah.
And think it's hilarious and cute.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And, look at the way that the smartphone has changed pretty much the way that people do everything. And that change is only beginning to penetrate health and medicine. So when that goes full throttle, I think it's going to be really different. And I also give doctors, more credit. I think doctors, even, every doctor, not functional medicine, they are curious, and they've done studies that show, they're not just these Luddites that just resist technology for the sake of resisting it. There are reasons, and the technology that hasn't been built for them in a way that is always makes sense or works. And I really look forward to the tech community, and this is happening, but I think it needs to happen more. Tech community and healthcare providers of all kinds working together to build better technologies, because a lot of times this stuff is getting built, it's getting forced upon the medical community, and it just isn't right, and it's not always helpful, and then they're pissed, and it's like, it says, oh, doctors don't like these things, but they do. And as the generations come up and expect to be doing everything digitally in the rest of their lives, they're definitely expecting to be doing it in their jobs as healthcare providers. So I think we deserve to give them more credit and to have the tech community respond a little bit more to their needs instead of just the other way around.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I've heard recently from providers at hospitals and so forth. They buy a technology because they see the value of it, but then their technology doesn't talk to the other technology, and these are more teething problems than long-term problems.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I think as the space, one of the critical things in the space, and I think to be successful in, the digital transformation of healthcare, as it were, you can't be a closed system. And a lot of people who try to own data and say, well, we're going to own all this data and we're not going to talk to anybody else, they're doomed to failure, because what's going to end up thriving is an ecosystem that has multiple intercommunication channels, and anything that tries to shut that out and just own a chunk of it for itself, I think will fail. And we'll see that now, but it won't last.
Interesting. Yeah, and I definitely see that working itself out. So if you're a doctor now and you are seeing this coming down, what do you think is, because one of the things that it seems like from here on is that doctors are going to have to deal with a lot more data, right? Mm-hmm. They have limited data right now. As they start to have a lot more data coming in, how are doctors going to adjust to the process of having a lot more data and trying to work out what's superfluous, what's actually accurate, what's real, what's not, what's actually having an impact?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that attempts to regulate the digital health area, meet with much resistance. And there is a bit of a problem with a lot of these technologies not being validated and having their data not being validated. And I think we are going to come to a bit of a head where the government already is involved, and they're going to get more involved to say, if you're collecting all of this data and then you want it to be something that you want a doctor to consider as valid, You have to do the background research, tech person. This is on you to make sure that this is real, this is validated, this is meaningful, and that you present it in a way that can be read. You can't just throw a bunch of raw data at anybody and expect it to be useful, and expect anybody to catch on and like it, right? So I think that there's a nice balance there, a check and balance, where people are going to want the technologies that, one, are validated, have reliable data, and present the data in a way that's incredibly manageable. Because that's what computers are for. I mean, we have a ton of data now. We just don't have good ways of managing it and organizing it in our systems. So I think that's going to be really important.
So obviously one of the things with doctor uptake, and you're speaking to all kinds of people today, but for a functional medicine doctor or a doctor who's considering do this kind of medicine, why is it important to get ahead of the curve with technology?
Great question. So there's so many reasons. First of all, I think more and more your patients are going to expect it. I don't know, how many patients, if you ask them, and I think there have been studies on this, would say, do I care if my doctor has an electronic record? And more people are going to care, and they're not going to want to see you if you don't. Another thing is that it's so much safer. I mean, you're not looking at trying to read handwritten notes and decipher what medications people are on and trying to remember what, med somebody told you. It's going to be that everybody has a personal health record. It's going to be an app on their phone. It's going to be something that everyone owns. They're going to come to you with this and say, here's all my information. And you're going to want to be ready to receive it, to upload it into your system, and to have it populate all this information. There's already some really cool patient intake tools and questionnaire tools. There's something called Tonic for Health that builds really cool iPad-based, so when somebody comes in, they're not sitting there writing down a handwritten form that then has to be translated. You want to be getting in front of that. Somebody comes into your office and they're going to say, oh my gosh, this is, and maybe they're looking for natural alternatives. Maybe the medical system has failed them. Maybe they just philosophically believe in functional medicine, but they're there, and they're also going to say, wow, this person is really on top of things, is really forward thinking, because everything they're doing is automated, electronic. It makes it so much easier to communicate with your patients if you can use secure email, if you can use the tools that are being built for you to make your life easier. And I think that initially it can seem really overwhelming to start adopting these technologies, but start experimenting with it. If you feel like some of your patients are wearing some of these sensors and, maybe they're open to it, or if you've tried them yourself, start asking people and see if you can, don't be afraid to reach out to some of these smaller companies that aggregate this kind of data, or some of the wearable technology companies themselves. They would kill, first of all, for the opportunity to pilot whatever it is they're doing in your office. Yeah. And they will bend over backwards to make it easy for you, because if they're a startup, or if they're even, doing pretty well but still a young company, they want any opportunity they can to show that what they're doing works. They will make it easier for you. They will come in, they should set it up for you. And if you're willing to pilot some of these technologies in your office, get patient feedback and see how it starts to influence your practice, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be contributing, I think, to the evolution of medicine. And then the other thing is that, so many people are, afraid of these technologies taking up their time. And anything that's new takes time, right? I mean, the first time you saw a patient as a functional medicine doctor, it probably took you twice as long as it does now. Yeah. So you got to get over the learning curve. It's a learning curve like anything else. You probably already have a smartphone, so you probably already have some of these skill sets inherently. But I think that as, yes, it may slow you down initially, but eventually it'll make you much faster. And then the other thing for functional medicine in particular that I think is so important, I think functional medicine, integrative medicine doctors, they're doing great work. And that work needs to be documented, and they need to be showing outcomes. And a lot of these practices aren't tracking their outcomes, and they're having great outcomes. They're curing irritable bowel syndrome. They are healing Lyme disease. They are doing things that are incredible. They're putting out autoimmune fires that, conventional medicine is, putting people in the hospital for IV drips for weeks for. Yeah. So if you can track that and show that, that's huge. I think that's massive. And even though you don't have to track outcomes if you're, say, doing functional medicine and you don't take insurance and you're kind of off the grid, even if, you don't have to publish the data until you want to, but that could be incredibly illuminating, not just for being a better doctor in your practice and helping your patients, but for furthering the field at large.
Yeah. Finding ways to collect outcomes data and track and organize it is obviously going to be a huge thing too, right?
Huge, 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 huge. And a lot of these companies and they're out there, they're doing this. So they're doing the work for you. So if you're not sure, come find me or talk to the folks at Health 2.0, go to the Health 2.0 conference, start learning a little bit about this, read a couple articles. But there are companies out there who want nothing more than to help you track outcomes. So you don't have to do it. You just have to let one of them come in, tap into your system or create a little system for you, make them do the work, but start tracking your outcomes, and it could really make a difference for the future of medicine.
That's a great opportunity for a lot of people, because getting ahead of the curve, I think, is what a lot of functional medicine doctors have been really into already. You know, they're
Right.
getting ahead of the curve clinically, but this curve has a lot more potential to change everything than just the clinical model.
I mean, I think they both do, and I think for this one you need help. And so, physicians are independent and they're very smart and they've worked very hard to know what they know, and it takes a lot of time and energy to be a good clinician. So, sort of grappling with the cutting edge of technology can be really difficult, but what we want is for these two worlds to start talking to each other. And no, you can't do all the tech stuff on your own, but make the people who are doing the tech stuff come in and help you. Because remember that they really benefit from it too, because they get to show that what they're doing helps you, it helps your patients. That validates their technology, and we just snowballed this whole thing so much bigger.
Yeah, that's a big part for everyone. So what would you say, could you give your top 5 most exciting apps that you're into, or tech tools right now?
Oh my gosh, great question. Okay, the thing I want to take off but sort of hasn't yet is the personal health record, and I've talked about that a lot. But somebody asked me what my pet peeve was, and I said it's when I have a couple, but it's when people come in and don't know what medications they're on, and I want to literally shake them by their shoulders and say, "You put this in your mouth every day, and you don't know what it is, and you don't know how much of it you're taking." But I do understand that for the average person, or even myself, if you have a lot of medications or supplements or whatever it is, knowing what these things are and keeping track of them is like virtually impossible. So there are more and more tools coming out to make that easier. I think there's some coming out that aren't out yet that are going to make it really easy and really fun and really user-friendly, but there's some out there. So those are ones that I would encourage, patients, people, doctors are people too, I always like to say, to check those out. And if it'll help you as a physician if your patients use these things, so encourage them to use them. Another thing that I really love, I love this company Signal. It's because it's sensors embedded in your clothes, and it's really kind of clunky right now, and I think it's one of those Star Trek-y things we're going to look back on.
Yep.
But their demo is really cool, and it's really interesting to see. I think eventually there are going to be sensors embedded in what we wear, just in the fabric of what we're wearing, and I think it's going to be the evolution of Signal, but I think it's going to be really fun and interesting.
What benefit do you get from having the stuff in your clothes?
Well, and right now a lot of people wear these bracelets and they get sick of it after a little bit because they just get sick of wearing some. I don't like to wear them. I don't think it's very stylish. It's not my style to wear a plastic bracelet every day.
Okay.
So I would like something invisible that goes in, my bra or my shirt or whatever, the waistband of my pants, that you just as a little sticker and you slap on.
Yep.
I think that there's some really cool things out there. This is more on the medical side, but that for people who have diabetes and therefore have diabetic neuropathy and have balance issues, there's these cool pads that people can stand on, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but that can help give essentially a sort of different form of biofeedback to show people how they're standing, to help people with their proprioception and with their balance, which is, as we see our population age, and is going to be a bigger and bigger problem. There's so many elderly people who are relatively functioning well, and then they fall and they break a hip, and that's it for them.
Yep.
And if we can get around that and use tech to do it, I think it's going to be really huge, and there's already some cool things out there. And then some of the ones that I also think are interesting and we don't hear about as much are the food ones. So there was a study that showed that just taking a photograph of your food and doing a photo food diary as opposed to a written food diary actually changed behavior. So taking the photo, because you had to stop and take the photo and kind of in that split second see what you're eating, ended up being a therapeutic intervention.
I like that.
So you're taking a photo of everything else. You might as well take a photo of your food, and there's some great apps out there that let you do that. Also some cool apps that let you help you find healthier food. I don't know how people are not more confused. It was don't eat fat, don't eat fat, don't eat saturated fat. And then what they really meant was don't eat meat because actually you need saturated fat. If I were just somebody in the general public who didn't think about this stuff all the time and read all the articles coming out, I would say
you'd be tuned out.
I'd say you people don't know what you're talking about. When it comes to food and nutrition, I'm not going to listen to you, and I'm going to go eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
So that's a problem in helping people decipher what to eat and what not to eat in a personalized way, because I don't think what's in functional medicine, what you should eat versus what I should eat is not the same thing.
Yep.
There's some cool apps out there that help for that.
Isn't it going to be cool to see actually feedback on what you eat? So you think, okay, well, I eat this and my blood pressure goes up like this and my cholesterol goes up like this, but maybe it only goes up 10% of that if I'm thinking of my wife at the same time, or other things that you can modulate that, everything's connected to everything. It seems like what we might start to understand is that a medicine that we've been having such a tough time with isn't actually that tough. I've seen a lot of new sciences coming out where people even just standing in a position with their arms above their head or standing in a power pose reduces their stress hormones, increases other hormones. It just feels like maybe, that once we can get all this information ahead of time and just do things every day to change it, we may not have as tough a time balancing everything as we are right now.
Totally. And I agree with that. I mean, we're sort of having a very, somewhat esoteric and very macro level conversation right now. But ultimately, what the whole point of all these technologies is to make your life easier and to make your life simpler. And we have made health a sort of complicated thing that you need a very, very highly educated person to help you with. And really, health is just how you live. And it happens all the time, every moment. Us sitting here right now for this hour is affecting our health. And if you can use some of these technologies to help people realize that, I think when we have really good sensors tracking all of this stuff, we're going to realize that some of the things that we as functional medicine doctors say are wrong, and we have to be ready for that.
Yeah.
And all physicians and all
humility
experts,
by everyone.
Humility is going to happen because some of it's just going to be wrong. That's the way it goes. But at least we'll know, and we're all going to be better for it in the long run.
That's so cool. Yeah, I've certainly seen some interesting. You mentioned taking a photo. I saw this app recently that was where you actually would make a pact with yourself. It's called Pact, where you actually put money down to make your behavior changes, and seeing how people get influenced and inspired by financial incentives. I really like the pill pack thing, where basically instead of having to open all the pills, you get it sent to you and you get a pack, and every day you see what you need to take and it says it on there. That would be great for people who don't know what they're taking.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's almost like every area of medicine, from the delivery of the actual medicine itself right through to like sensing things, all going to be disrupted, right?
Oh, definitely.
Well, it's an exciting time for medicine, and I really appreciate you coming in and sharing with us, what that's going to mean for patients and doctors. I hope everyone at home, when they hear this, are as excited as I am and you are about the future, because it sounds like everyone's going to have an easier life. It sounds like, everyone's going to be able to be a lot healthier and understand health a lot more causatively. And I think those are the green shoots that make for a very improved society, really, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I think we're going to cultivate a whole new level of awareness. I mean, in the medicine that I practice, I think so much about, just awareness and what that does for someone. Usually if somebody becomes aware of one thing, I always see it snowball. They get into yoga, then they start thinking about what they eat. And right now that those kinds of access points, those touch points, like a yoga class, unfortunately can be limited to a certain population. And I think what technology is going to do, and I think the whole point of technology and the whole reason you should care about any of this, and if some of it sounds super out there, whatever, but I think the whole point of technology is not as to be an end in and of itself, but to make things that right now just a small percentage of the population gets to enjoy and be aware of around health accessible to everybody, and just give everyone the opportunity to live their healthiest life. And what technology does is even the playing field. So I'm personally really excited for that.
Well, that sounds like a vision that we can all get behind. Dr. Berzin, thanks so much for making time to be here today. It's
anytime for you, James.
Thank you so much. It's been great to have you. This is the Evolution of Medicine Summit. We've been with Dr. Robin Berzin. If you want to find out more about her, Dr. Robin, it's robinberzinmd.com. And thanks so much. And we'll look forward to maybe some functional medicine techie cocktail parties.
Yes,
and
we'll set the next one up. For sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.